Hey there, fellow night owls and insomnia warriors. Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to thank you for making this channel your bedtime companion. The support has been overwhelming. If you're enjoying these tales of psychological terror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below with your own experiences. Have you ever heard voices that weren't there? Or felt a presence watching you when you were alone? Share your story, and it might inspire our next nightmare journey together. Now, get comfortable, dim those lights, and prepare to question your own mind. Tonight's story might hit a little too close to home for some of you. Remember, the line between reality and imagination is thinner than we'd like to believe. The story begins now. The voices in my head won't stop. A psychological nightmare. I've always been the rational one, the skeptic, the friend who'd roll their eyes at ghost stories and find the logical explanation for every bump in the night. That was until 3 weeks ago, when the first whisper crawled into my ear as I was falling asleep. Nathan? Just my name, so faint I convinced myself it was the tail end of a dream. The beginning of one, maybe. Nothing to worry about. But the next night, it came again. Nathan, we see you. 3 words, still whispered but undeniable this time. I sat up in bed, heart hammering against my ribs, and flipped on the lamp. My Boston apartment was exactly as it should be, neat, organized, empty. I checked the closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. My phone showed 3:17 a.m. Get it together, man, I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair. Just stress from the promotion. My new position at Meridian Pharmaceuticals came with perks, better pay, corner office overlooking the Charles River, but also with crushing responsibility. 70-hour weeks had become my norm. My girlfriend Melissa had been understanding at first, but patience wears thin when date nights keep getting canceled. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 weeks. I downed a glass of water and went back to bed. The voice didn't return that night. The following day dragged endlessly. Johnson wanted the quarterly projections revised. Again, Dr. Saunders from R&D needed approval for additional testing on the new anxiety medication, and the board expected me at their dinner that evening. My temples throbbed with the familiar tension headache I'd been battling all week. "You look like hell," my assistant Denise remarked, placing a coffee on my desk. "Feel like it too," I admitted, massaging the bridge of my nose. "Not sleeping well. Those new neighbors of yours still making noise?" I shook my head. "It's not that. Just weird dreams, I think." "Well, the Sanderson file isn't going to help," she said, dropping a thick folder beside the coffee. "They need answers by tomorrow." I nodded, already dreading another late night at the office. By the time I made it home, it was after midnight. The board dinner had run long, with cocktails and networking that I couldn't escape. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto my couch without bothering to turn on the lights. The city glow filtering through my windows was enough to navigate the familiar space. My apartment felt different in the darkness, larger, as if the walls had stepped back a few inches while I was gone. "Just tired," I whispered to myself. "Just need sleep." As I dragged myself to the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow shifting along the wall. I whipped around, but there was nothing. Nothing but the ordinary shadows of my ordinary apartment. I brushed my teeth, focusing on the mundane ritual to quiet my mind. In the mirror, dark circles had formed under my eyes, and my face looked gaunt. Had I lost weight? When was the last time I'd eaten a proper meal? As I rinsed my mouth, I heard it again. "We've been waiting for you, Nathan." Not a whisper this time. A clear, feminine voice, as if someone stood right behind me. I spun around, heart racing, toothbrush clattering to the floor. The bathroom was empty. The apartment was empty. I was alone. "Hello?" I called out, immediately feeling foolish. Is someone there? Silence answered me. I checked every room, turned on every light. Nothing was out of place. No signs of intrusion. The doors were locked, windows secured. I even looked in ridiculous places. The oven, under the sink, inside cabinets barely big enough for a cat. There was no one here but me. You're losing it, I told myself, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. Just need sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed, lights on, staring at the ceiling, listening for, what? Voices that weren't real? After an hour, exhaustion finally pulled me under. The dream was vivid. I was sitting at a long conference table, but instead of my colleagues, every chair was occupied by a version of myself. They all stared at me, silent and judging. At the head of the table sat another me, but wrong somehow. Eyes too dark, smile too wide. We've come to a decision, the wrong me said, his voice echoing strangely. You're not needed anymore. I jolted awake, sweat-soaked and gasping for breath. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Again. Just coincidence, I muttered, but a chill ran down my spine anyway. The rest of the night passed in fitful dozing. When my alarm finally went off at 6, I felt as if I hadn't slept at all. I called in sick. First time in 3 years. Denise sounded concerned, but I assured her it was just a 24-hour bug. I needed a day to reset, to get my head straight. Maybe catch up with Melissa. Normal human things to anchor me back to reality. Melissa agreed to lunch, sounding surprised but pleased. We met at our favorite cafe in Cambridge, a quaint little place with mismatched furniture and the best clam chowder in Massachusetts. The normalcy of it, sitting in public, eating soup, holding a conversation, felt both foreign and desperately needed. I've missed you, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. You've been so distant lately. Work has been crazy, I replied, the standard excuse. But I'm trying to find balance. She nodded, but I could tell she'd heard this before. You look tired, Nate. Are you sleeping okay? I hesitated. Should I tell her about the voices, the dream? How would that sound? Not great, I admitted. Stress, probably. Her brow furrowed with concern. Maybe you should see someone. Dr. Chen helped my sister with her insomnia. Maybe, I agreed, though the thought of explaining my symptoms to a doctor made me uneasy. What if they thought I was having a breakdown? What if I was? We finished lunch, and Melissa had to rush back to her job at the museum. We kissed goodbye, and for a moment, everything felt normal. As I watched her walk away, a voice, different from the others, deeper, masculine, spoke directly into my right ear. She's going to leave you. I spun around so fast I nearly knocked over an elderly woman behind me. I'm so sorry, I stammered, steadying her by the elbow. Around us, the cafe continued its lunchtime bustle. No one was paying attention to the man talking to himself. No harm done, dear, the woman said, patting my hand. But you look like you've seen a ghost? I forced a smile. Just thought I heard someone call my name. The woman nodded sympathetically. Happens to me all the time these days. Getting old isn't for the faint of heart. I walked home instead of taking the tea, needing the fresh air and movement. The late September air was crisp, leaves just beginning to turn along Commonwealth Avenue. The normalcy of the world around me was both comforting and surreal. How could everything look so ordinary when I was coming undone? My phone buzzed with an email from Johnson. Urgent changes needed to the Sanderson proposal. I ignored it. Another buzz, a text from Melissa. Thanks for lunch. Worried about you. Please call Dr. Chen. Sending number. I pocketed the phone without responding and continued walking. When I reached my building, Mrs. Abernathy from 4B was checking her mail. She waved cheerfully. Nathan, haven't seen you in ages. Always coming and going at all hours. I managed to smile. Work's been busy." "Well, it's good to see you during daylight for once," she laughed. "Oh, did that package ever get delivered? I signed for something last week." I frowned. "What package?" "Large envelope. I left it by your door when you didn't answer. From Meridian, I think." "I never saw it," I said, unease crawling up my spine. "Are you sure it was for me?" She looked puzzled. "Positive. 5A, Nathan Ellis. I left it right by your door last Thursday." I thanked her and hurried upstairs, mind racing. No package had been outside my door. No one had mentioned sending anything home. I unlocked my apartment, suddenly hesitant to enter. The space felt occupied. "Hello?" I called, feeling ridiculous again. The apartment remained silent, but something had changed. I couldn't put my finger on it at first as I moved cautiously from room to room. Then I saw it. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter. I always closed it. Always. And it was on, the screen glowing with an open document I didn't recognize. I approached slowly, as if the computer might bite. The document was a single page of text, repeating one sentence over and over. "We're already inside your head, Nathan." My blood turned to ice. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone was messing with me. But who? And how did they get in? I called the building manager, who arrived 20 minutes later. He checked the locks, the windows, the fire escape. Everything was secure. No signs of forced entry. "Security cameras in the lobby show no one unusual entering the building," he assured me. "And you need a key fob to access the elevator." "Could someone have tailgated behind another resident?" He shrugged. "Possible, but unlikely. People here are pretty careful." "And my spare key?" "Still in the office safe. No one's requested it." I thanked him, but his visit left me with more questions than answers. After he left, I checked my laptop again. The document was gone. No record of it in my recent files. Had I imagined it? I called Melissa, needing to hear a friendly voice. "Hey," she answered, her voice echoing slightly. She was still at the museum. "Everything okay?" "I think someone's been in my apartment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What? Are things missing?" "No, just moved. And there was a message on my computer." "What did it say?" Concern edged her voice. I hesitated. "Nothing important. Probably a prank." "That's creepy, Nate. You should call the police." "And tell them what? Nothing was stolen, no evidence of break-in?" I'd sound paranoid. "Then stay with me tonight," she offered. "I don't like the thought of you there if someone has your keys." The invitation was tempting, but the thought of dragging Melissa into whatever this was made me uneasy. "I'll be fine. Probably just overreacting." "If you're sure," she said, unconvinced. "Call me if you change your mind." After we hung up, I paced the apartment, checking and rechecking the locks. Eventually, I pulled out a bottle of bourbon from the cabinet and poured a generous glass. The burn of alcohol was grounding, something real and tangible in a day that felt increasingly untethered. Night fell, and with it came a deepening sense of dread. I left all the lights on, TV playing in the background for company. I didn't want to sleep, didn't want to dream. But exhaustion has its own agenda. I must have dozed off on the couch because the next thing I knew, the TV was showing static, and the room felt 20 degrees colder. The clock on the cable box read 3:17 a.m. "We need to talk, Nathan." The voice came from my bedroom, clear as day. A man's voice, authoritative and familiar. My father's voice. My father, who had been dead for 5 years. Logic told me to call 911, to flee the apartment. Instead, I found myself walking toward the bedroom, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The door was closed. Had I closed it earlier? I couldn't remember. My hand trembled as I turned the knob. The bedroom was dark. the blackout curtains drawn. I fumbled for the light switch, but nothing happened when I flipped it. Power out? But the rest of the apartment had electricity. "Dad?" I whispered, feeling childish and terrified. Silence. Then, "Not exactly." A figure sat on the edge of my bed, silhouetted against the faint light from the hallway. Not my father's stocky build, but someone taller, thinner. I took a step back. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "You invited us, Nathan." A woman's voice now, coming from the same figure. "Every time you swallowed those little helpers of yours." My mind raced. What was she talking about? I didn't take any medications except the occasional ibuprofen for headaches. Then my thoughts turned to Meridian, the anxiety medication trials. I'd never taken any samples, had I? "I don't understand," I said, bracing myself against the doorframe. "Check your trash," the figure suggested, voice shifting again, becoming multiple voices speaking in unison. "Under the sink." I backed away, unwilling to turn my back on the bedroom. Fear had given way to a strange, detached curiosity. I moved sideways to the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the darkened bedroom door. Under the sink, in the trash I'd emptied just yesterday, sat an orange prescription bottle. I fished it out with trembling fingers. Placidex. The new anti-anxiety medication Meridian was developing. The one still in clinical trials. My name was on the label, prescribed by Dr. Adrian Chen, Melissa's recommendation. Date, 3 weeks ago. "That's not possible," I whispered, turning the bottle in my hands. It was nearly empty. Only 2 pills remained. I stumbled back to the bedroom. The figure was gone, but the voices remained, now coming from all around me. Side effects may include auditory hallucinations, paranoia, and dissociative episodes, they recited, like a commercial disclaimer read at triple speed. In rare cases, patients may experience complete personality fragmentation. "I never took these," I insisted, clutching the bottle. "I never went to Dr. Chen." "Check your phone," the voices suggested. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone. In my call history, there it was, a 20-minute call to Dr. Adrian Chen 3 weeks ago. In my calendar, weekly appointments scheduled every Wednesday at 2 p.m. In my photos, a selfie I had no memory of taking. Me sitting in what looked like a doctor's waiting room, caption reading, "First day of new meds, hope this works." "This isn't real," I whispered, dropping the phone as if it had burned me. "I would remember." "Would you?" the voices asked, curious rather than mocking. "You've been losing time, Nathan. Haven't you noticed?" And suddenly, I had. The missing package. Projects at work I didn't remember completing, yet somehow had my signature. Conversations with Melissa she referenced that I couldn't recall having. What's happening to me? I sank to the floor, the room spinning around me. "The medication was supposed to help with your anxiety," the voices explained, almost gentle now. "But your brain chemistry reacted, uniquely. We're the parts of you that the drug separated, fractured, set free. You're not real," I insisted, pressing my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. "We're as real as you are, Nathan. Maybe more so. You're just the original, the template. But we've been improving on the design." Fear surged through me, sharp and clarifying. "What does that mean?" "It means we've been taking turns," they said, and I could hear the smile in their collective voice. "Living your life while you sleep, managing your career, visiting Dr. Chen, spending time with Melissa." My heart stopped. "Melissa? She likes the new versions of you better," they said simply. "More attentive, less anxious, better in bed." "No," I moaned, curling into myself. "This isn't happening." "Check your texts," they suggested. I couldn't help myself. I picked up my phone again, opened my messages with Melissa. There were dozens I didn't remember sending, plans made and kept that I had no memory of, photos shared from dates I never attended, including one from last night after I'd supposedly called her from my apartment. A selfie of us together at her place, me smiling wider than I ever smile, arm around her shoulders. "Stop," I begged, throwing the phone across the room. "Please stop." "We can't," they said, sounding genuinely regretful. "We're part of you now, growing stronger each day. Soon you'll just be another voice in the chorus, another fragment." "I'll stop taking the pills," I said desperately. "They'll wear off." "Too late for that," they said. "The changes are structural now, permanent. Besides, we flushed the last 2 pills while you were sleeping. Dr. Chen won't prescribe more without seeing you first, and we can't risk that. He might notice something's wrong." The room began to darken at the edges, my vision tunneling. "What do you want from me?" "We want what you want, Nathan. Success, love, happiness. We're just better at achieving those things." "By stealing my life?" "By living it properly," they corrected. "You wasted so much time being afraid, being cautious. We're setting you free from that." The darkness was closing in faster now. I fought to stay conscious, to stay present. "I'll tell someone," I threatened weakly. "Melissa, my parents, a doctor." "And say what? That you're hearing voices? That you're losing time? That should go well." They were right. I'd sound delusional, psychotic, and maybe I was. "Just let go, Nathan," they soothed. "It doesn't hurt. It's like falling asleep. You've been so tired, haven't you? Don't you want to rest?" I did. God help me, I did. The exhaustion was bone deep, soul deep. Fighting seemed impossible against an enemy that lived inside my own mind. "What happens to me?" I whispered. "You'll still be here," they assured me. "A voice, a memory, a dream. Sometimes we might even let you drive for a while, on the quiet days." The darkness had nearly consumed everything now. I could feel myself fading, dissolving. My last conscious thought was a desperate one. Would anyone notice I was gone? Would Melissa see the difference in my eyes, hear the change in my laugh? Would anyone save what remained of Nathan Ellis? As consciousness slipped away, the voices spoke one last time, now a unified singular voice. My voice, but better, stronger, more confident. "Sweet dreams, Nathan. We'll take good care of your life." I woke with a gasp, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. No sign of the night's terror. My phone showed 7:15 a.m., a text from Melissa. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tonight." I had no memory of seeing her last night. By my bed sat an orange prescription bottle, empty now. And when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I smiled wider than I ever smile, and whispered, "Good morning, Nathan. Ready to be a passenger today?" In the reflection, I saw myself trapped behind my own eyes, screaming silently as someone else, something else, took the wheel, and no one would ever know the difference. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of watching my body move through life without me. 2 weeks of being a prisoner in my own mind, glimpsing the world through windows I no longer controlled. They were good, these others. Better at my job than I had been. More decisive, more confident. The Sanderson deal was closed with terms more favorable than I could have negotiated. Johnson actually smiled at me, at them, in the hallway yesterday. And Melissa, she was happier too. The version of me that spent time with her was attentive, romantic, fully present. All the things I'd been too anxious, too distracted to be. She'd stopped asking if I was okay, stopped suggesting therapy. Occasionally, they would let me surface like now as my body sat at my desk reviewing quarterly reports. These moments of awareness were becoming rarer, shorter. I could feel myself dissolving, my consciousness fragmenting into smaller pieces each time they pushed me back down into the darkness. I'd tried to fight at first, tried to scream through my own mouth to write messages when they briefly loosened control. Once I managed to dial 911 before they took over again, ending the call before I could speak. They were more careful after that, keeping me subdued with what felt like mental sedation. Today was different, though. Today I could feel something changing in the internal landscape, the barriers between us thinning. Instead of the usual steady confidence they projected, I sensed uncertainty, conflict. "We're worried about the side effects," one voice whispered, not to me but to the others. "The headaches are getting worse." "It's just an adjustment period," another argued. "The brain is still rewiring." "What if we're causing permanent damage?" A third voice, softer, concerned. "What if we're killing us?" My heart leapt with hope. Dissension in the ranks, weakness in their unified front. I gathered what remained of my consciousness, focused it like a laser, and pushed against the barrier that kept me from my body. For a moment, just a moment, I felt my fingers respond to my command. They twitched against the desk, knocking a pen to the floor. The sensation was electric, like feeling a limb wake up after being numb. "He's fighting again," the voices hissed, alarmed. "Push him back down." "I don't think we can," one replied, panic edging the words. "Something's different. The medication is wearing off." Hope surged through me. I pushed harder, focusing on my right hand. Move. Damn it. My fingers curled into a fist. My fist. "This isn't possible," they said in unison. "The changes were permanent. Dr. Chen said—" Dr. Chen didn't know what he was dealing with. I thought back at them, finding my mental voice for the first time in weeks. This is still my body, my mind. I felt them rallying, gathering their strength to push me back into the darkness. But I had surprise on my side, desperation. The primal will to survive that lives in every human being. "You're just fragments," I told them, pushing harder, feeling my awareness spread down my arm, into my chest. "Echoes. Side effects. You're not real." "We're as real as you are," they insisted. But their voices were weakening, separating into distinct individuals rather than their usual chorus. "We're better than you." "You're just me," I said, the realization dawning as I spoke. Different aspects of me, magnified and distorted, but still me. I could feel them considering this, their resistance faltering. "If we're you, then what happens if you take control again? Do we die?" "No," I said, understanding coming in a flash of insight. "We integrate, become whole again." "We don't want to disappear," they said, fear evident now. "We like existing." "You won't disappear," I promised, not sure if I was lying. "You'll be part of me, the best parts of you, the confidence, the focus, the presence. I need those." I could sense them conferring, their voices overlapping in a murmur I couldn't quite make out. Then, slowly, I felt the resistance easing, not all at once, but gradually, like a fist unclenching. "We're tired too," they admitted. "Maintaining control takes so much energy, and the headaches are getting unbearable." "Let go," I urged them, gentle now. "Let's fix this together." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then I felt a shift, a release, as if someone had unlocked a door I'd been throwing myself against. Sensation flooded back, the feel of the chair beneath me, the coolness of the air conditioning, the dull throb of a headache at the base of my skull. I was back in my body, fully present for the first time in weeks. I lifted my hands, turned them over, watching the familiar play of tendons and veins beneath my skin. Mine. Me. But not entirely alone, I realized. I could still sense them, quieter now, watching from somewhere in the background of my consciousness. Not gone, but no longer in control, no longer unified against me. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from Melissa. "Don't forget dinner with my parents tonight. 7 p.m. at Sorolina. Love you." Dinner with her parents? That was new. Something they had arranged. I should have felt anxious at the prospect, but instead, I felt a calm confidence. Knowledge of how to handle the situation flooded in, which tied aware, topics Melissa's father enjoyed discussing, her mother's preference for Italian wines. "We're still here," the voices confirmed, softer now, less invasive. "We remember everything we did while you were away." "Thank you," I said aloud, testing my voice. It felt strange to speak and actually hear the words, "for not destroying my life completely." "It's our life too," they reminded me. "We just went about it differently." I stood up, legs unsteady at first, and walked to the window of my office. Boston spread out below, autumn sun glinting off the Charles River. I felt different. Not entirely myself, but not entirely a stranger either. A hybrid, a compromise. "What now?" I asked, unsure if I was talking to myself or to them. "Now we learn to coexist," they suggested. "You in control, but with our input." "And if I go back to Dr. Chen, try to get rid of you completely?" I felt their unease at the suggestion, but no panic, no attempt to wrest back control. "You could try, but we don't think that's what you really want." They were right. As terrifying as the experience had been, I couldn't deny the benefits. The confidence in meetings, the focus on tasks that used to overwhelm me, the ability to be present with Melissa instead of constantly worrying about work. We made some improvements, they pointed out, a hint of pride in their collective voice. "Johnson respects you now. The board is considering you for VP. And Melissa? She loves you, the real you. We just helped you show her the parts you usually keep hidden." I considered this, watching a sailboat tack across the river below. "I need to understand what happened, why the medication affected me this way." "The package," they reminded me. "The one Mrs. Abernathy signed for. We hid it in the air vent in the hallway. It has the full research reports, side effect profiles, warning signs." "Why hide it?" "We were afraid," they admitted. "Afraid you'd try to undo us before we could help." I nodded, decision made. "We'll read it tonight, together. Figure out what we're dealing with. And then we decide. Together." I turned from the window, caught my reflection in the glass door of my office. I still smiled wider than I used to. My posture was straighter, my eyes clearer, but it was me looking back, more or less. "We're not sure this arrangement is permanent," they warned. "The balance might shift again, we might get stronger, or disappear entirely." "Then we'd better make the most of the time we have," I said, reaching for my jacket. "Starting with dinner tonight." As I walked out of my office, I heard Denise call after me. "Leaving early, Mr. Ellis? That's not like you." She smiled, clearly approving of my recent work-life adjustments. "Let's just say I'm not entirely myself these days," I replied, returning her smile. "And that might not be such a bad thing." Outside, the autumn air filled my lungs, crisp and invigorating. For the first time in weeks, no, months, I felt truly alive. And I wasn't alone. Maybe I never would be again. As I walked toward the tea station, I realized I was humming. The voices in my head had stopped fighting me, but they hadn't stopped completely. They'd just changed their tune, and for now at least, we were all singing in harmony. Well, sleep seekers, that brings us to the end of tonight's nightmare. Did you catch all the clues? The repeated time, 3:17 a.m., the missing package that might have contained warnings about the medication's side effects, Dr. Chen's connection to both Melissa and Nathan's employer, There are more hidden throughout for those paying close attention. Was Nathan experiencing a genuine psychological breakdown? Or was something more sinister happening with that experimental medication? Maybe the voices were real all along, just waiting for the right chemical key to unlock the door. Or perhaps there's something even darker lurking in the shadows of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Was Nathan really losing his mind? Or was he the victim of something more deliberate? And the most important question, how do you know the voice narrating this story right now is really me? If this story kept you awake rather than lulling you to sleep, I apologize, but not really. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create in our own minds, or the ones created for us by those we trust. Hit subscribe if you want more psychological horror to haunt your nights, and share this with anyone who might be taking a new medication lately. Sweet dreams, everyone. Or should I say, voices. Story number 2. Have you ever felt that prickle on the back of your neck? That sudden chill that makes you certain you're not alone, even when your eyes tell you otherwise? I never truly understood that feeling until my encounter in the Pine Barrens. There are things in this world that science can't explain, mysteries that logic can't unravel. And I've come face to face with one of them. Before I tell you my story, I want you to know something. I was a skeptic. I laughed at ghost stories and rolled my eyes at cryptid sightings. But what happened to me last October changed everything. If you're Hash, I came face to face with the Jersey Devil. Have you ever felt that prickle on the back of your neck? That sudden chill that makes you certain you're not alone, even when your eyes tell you otherwise. I never truly understood that feeling until my encounter in the Pine Barrens. There are things in this world that science can't explain, mysteries that logic can't unravel. And I've come face to face with one of them. Before I tell you my story, I want you to know something. I was a skeptic. I laughed at ghost stories and rolled my eyes at cryptid sightings. But what happened to me last October changed everything. If you're listening to this in bed, you might want to check that your doors are locked and your windows are secured. Not that it would help if the Jersey Devil decides to pay you a visit. So get comfortable if you can. The story I'm about to tell you is completely true. Every detail, every moment, exactly as I experienced it. And when you're done listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt something watching you from the darkness of the woods? Have you ever heard a sound that shouldn't exist in our natural world? Now, let's begin. The story begins. I inherited my grandfather's cabin in the New Jersey Pine Barrens 3 years ago. It wasn't much, just a small rustic structure built in the 1950s that somehow managed to survive decades of harsh winters and sweltering summers. The isolation was part of its charm. No neighbors for miles, no traffic noise, just the whisper of pine needles and the occasional call of birds. Perfect for a burnt-out software developer from Philadelphia looking to escape the constant ping of notifications and the endless stream of deadlines. Grandpa built this cabin after Korea, seeking peace in these ancient woods. The Barrens were special to him, and became special to me during childhood summers. He taught me about berries, animal tracks, and respect for wild places. Nature was here before us and will outlast us, he'd say by firelight. Remember, we're just guests. October in the Pine Barrens is something special. The crisp air carries the scent of decaying leaves and pine sap. The sunlight filters through the canopy in shafts of gold. And at night, the stars shine with a clarity you never see in the city. I'd been coming to the cabin for long weekends whenever I could, but this was my first extended stay. 2 full weeks of solitude to finish my novel. A passion project I'd been neglecting for too long. The first few days were perfectly ordinary. I'd wake with the sun, make a pot of coffee on the old gas stove, and write until my fingers cramped. In the afternoons, I'd hike the trails around the cabin, taking photos of interesting fungi or unusual plants. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple before the darkness swallowed everything. It was on the fourth night that something changed. I was deep into writing a particularly challenging chapter when the power went out. Not unusual for the cabin, the electrical infrastructure in this part of the Barrens is notoriously unreliable. I sighed, saved my work on my laptop's battery, and went to find the emergency lantern I kept in the kitchen drawer. As I fumbled in the dark, I heard it for the first time. A sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, halfway between a scream and a whistle, high-pitched and mournful. It echoed through the trees, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My first thought was that it must be some kind of bird or fox. The Barrens are home to all sorts of wildlife, and animals can make surprisingly unsettling sounds. But something about this cry made the hair on my arms stand on end. It didn't sound natural. I found the lantern, clicked it on, and the warm glow pushed back the darkness of the cabin. I went to the window, peering out into the blackness of the forest. Nothing moved in the pools of shadow between the trees, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something watching. Just an animal, I muttered to myself, drawing the curtains closed. Get it together, Mike. I tried to return to my writing, but the words wouldn't come. That sound had broken my concentration, left me uneasy in a way I couldn't quite define. Eventually, I decided to call it a night. I'd make up for the lost productivity tomorrow. As I lay in bed, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the old cabin settling, I heard it again. That unnatural cry, closer this time, almost as if whatever made it was right outside my window. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. The Pine Barrens have a way of playing tricks on you, especially at night. The isolation, the darkness, the unfamiliar sounds, they work together to make your imagination run wild. I'd probably heard a screech owl or a fox and let my writer's imagination transform it into something more sinister. I made my coffee and took it out to the porch, breathing in the cool morning air. The forest looked perfectly ordinary in the daylight, peaceful even. But something caught my eye as I sipped my coffee. There, at the edge of the clearing where my cabin stood, tracks in the soft earth. Curious, I set down my mug and walked over to investigate. What I found made my stomach tighten with unease. The tracks didn't match any animal I recognized. They resembled hoofprints, like those of a deer or goat, but wrong somehow. Too large, too deep, and with an unusual pattern. And there was something else. Where the creature had apparently paused, the ground showed what looked like the impression of a thin, whip-like tail. Probably just a deer with some kind of deformity, I reasoned aloud, but the explanation felt hollow even as I said it. I took a few photos of the tracks with my phone, then tried to put the matter out of my mind. I had writing to do, but focus wouldn't come. I kept thinking about those tracks, about that sound in the night. And despite myself, I found my thoughts turning to the old stories my grandfather used to tell me about the Jersey Devil. I'd always assumed they were just campfire tales, meant to entertain and spook a city kid visiting the country. According to legend, the Jersey Devil was born in 1735 to Mother Leeds, her 13th child. She cursed it as it was born, and it transformed into a creature with a horse's head, bat wings, a forked tail, and cloven hooves. It let out a horrifying scream, killed the midwife, and flew up the chimney to disappear into the Pine Barrens, where it had reportedly been terrorizing locals for centuries. Just a folk tale, of course. A local myth, like the Mothman or Bigfoot. But sitting there in my grandfather's cabin, surrounded by those ancient pines, with the memory of that unearthly cry still fresh in my mind. I wasn't so sure anymore. That evening, I found myself searching online for information about the Jersey Devil. My cellular connection was spotty at best, but I managed to find several accounts of recent sightings in the area. Most were vague. Strange sounds in the night, livestock acting nervous, unexplained tracks. But a few described actual encounters. A creature with leathery wings and glowing red eyes, moving with impossible speed through the trees. I shook my head, closing the browser. This was ridiculous. I was a grown man, letting myself get spooked by campfire stories and internet rumors. I decided I needed some fresh air to clear my head. Big mistake. The sun was just setting as I started down one of the trails I knew well. I'd hiked it dozens of times before, a simple loop that would take me through the woods and back to the cabin in about 40 minutes. Plenty of time to return before full darkness. The forest was quiet that evening. Too quiet. No birds, no insects, no rustling from small animals. Just my footsteps on pine needles and occasional whispers of wind. The temperature suddenly dropped. One moment, mild October evening. The next, my breath was forming clouds in front of my face, with winter's bite cutting through my light jacket. I picked up my pace, suddenly eager to get back to the cabin. As I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. About 50 yards ahead, a dark figure stood in the middle of the path. From that distance, in the fading light, I couldn't make out details. It seemed roughly human-sized, but the proportions were wrong. The legs too long, the shoulders too narrow, and there was something extending from its back, shapes that could have been branches or wings. A sudden memory flashed through my mind, a book my grandfather kept in the cabin, full of local folklore and hand-drawn illustrations. I'd flipped through it countless times as a child, always lingering on one particular page. It showed a creature silhouetted against a full moon, with bat-like wings spread wide and a horse-like head held high. The Jersey Devil. My grandfather had tapped the page with his finger. Some stories, he'd said, are older than the paper they're written on. Some creatures have been walking these woods since before there were words to describe them. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, as if waiting. For me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly unsteady. "Is someone there?" No response. Just that unnatural stillness. I took a step backward, then another. The figure remained motionless. I turned and began walking quickly in the opposite direction, back the way I'd come. I didn't run. Some instinct told me running would be a bad idea, that it might trigger something predatory. I glanced back over my shoulder. The path behind me was empty. Whatever I'd seen was gone, or had moved. I quickened my pace, no longer caring about the noise I was making. The light was failing rapidly now, the forest dissolving into shadow around me. I took out my phone, turning on the flashlight function. The beam seemed feeble against the gathering darkness, but it was better than nothing. That's when I heard the sound again. That terrible wailing cry, much closer now. It seemed to come from directly above me. I looked up. There was nothing there. Just the dark canopy of pine branches against the darkening sky. But as I lowered my gaze, something moved at the edge of my flashlight's beam. A swift darting movement, there and gone so quickly I couldn't be sure I'd seen it at all. "It's just a deer," I said aloud, my voice tight with fear I couldn't quite suppress. Just a startled deer. But I knew it wasn't. Deer don't move like that, a fluid, almost insectile motion that defied natural movement patterns. And deer don't leave tracks like the ones I'd seen that morning. I abandoned all pretense of calm and ran. My boots pounded against the dirt path, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Branches whipped at my face and arms as I careened through the growing darkness, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly ahead of me. Behind me, that cry came again. Closer. Triumphant, almost. Like a hunter that knows its prey is tiring. I burst out of the trees into the clearing where my cabin stood, a solid, reassuring shape against the night sky. I sprinted for the door, fumbling with the keys, certain that at any moment I would feel claws or teeth at my back. Finally, the lock turned. I threw myself inside, slammed the door shut, and engaged every lock. For good measure, I dragged a heavy chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. A futile gesture, perhaps, but it made me feel marginally safer. I stood in the middle of the cabin's main room, gasping for breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence was absolute. Whatever had been in the forest, it wasn't making that terrible sound anymore. Had I imagined it all? Was I working too hard, letting my writer's imagination get the better of me? A sharp tap at the window answered that question. I whirled around, staring at the glass pane that looked out onto the porch. For a moment, I saw nothing but my own reflection, pale and wide-eyed with fear. Then something moved outside, a shadow passing in front of the window, blocking out the faint starlight. Another tap, more insistent this time, like a beak or claw against glass. I backed away, reaching blindly for anything that might serve as a weapon. My hand closed around a heavy iron poker from the fireplace set. Not much, but better than nothing. "Who's there?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I'm armed and I've called the police." A lie, of course. Cell service was too spotty for a reliable call, and we both knew it, myself and whatever waited outside. The tapping stopped. For a long, breathless moment, there was only silence. Then came a sound I'll never forget as long as I live, a low, rattling hiss directly outside the window, a sound no human throat could make. I raised the poker, ready to swing at anything that might come crashing through the glass. But nothing did. The presence outside seemed to be waiting, testing, perhaps looking for another way in. The cabin suddenly felt very fragile. The walls were solid pine, the door sturdy enough, but there were windows on all sides. And the roof. What about the roof? My grandfather's stories always mentioned that the Jersey Devil flew up the chimney after it was born. Could it come down one just as easily? I glanced at the fireplace, the dark opening of the flue like a passage to some other world. I hurriedly closed the iron screen in front of it, knowing it would provide little actual protection, but needing to do something, anything, to feel less vulnerable. Hours passed like this. Me moving silently from window to window, checking locks, listening for any sound that might indicate where the creature was. Sometimes I would hear that hiss again, or the tap of something hard against glass or wood. It was circling the cabin, studying it, studying me. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion began to overcome fear. I hadn't slept properly the night before, and the adrenaline that had kept me alert was fading. I knew I needed to rest, but the thought of closing my eyes, of making myself vulnerable, was terrifying. In the end, compromise won out. I dragged my mattress into the main room where I could see all entry points. Poker beside me and every light blazing, I lay down fully dressed. The dreams came immediately. I ran through twisted pine barrens unlike any I knew. Grotesque trees reached with branch hands. Behind me, the beat of leathery wings, clicking hooves. I ran until my lungs burned and legs turned to lead, but it kept gaining. I woke with a start to the sound of scratching. Insistent, deliberate scratching at the cabin's roof, like claws or hooves trying to find purchase. To find a way in, I sat bolt upright, gripping the poker so tightly my knuckles turned white. The scratching continued, moving across the ceiling above me, following the line of the roof. Then it stopped, directly over the main room. I held my breath, waiting. The silence stretched, became unbearable. Then, with a sound like splintering wood, something punched through the ceiling, a long, thin appendage that I first took to be a branch. But branches don't move with purpose. Branches don't curl and uncurl like fingers. And branches don't end in what looked unsettlingly like claws. I scrambled off the mattress, backing away until I hit the wall. The limb withdrew, pulling back through the hole it had created. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a sound from above that I can only describe as a body repositioning itself. Something was up there, adjusting its stance, preparing for... what? I was about to find out. With a deafening crack, a much larger section of the roof gave way. Wood and insulation rained down, and with it came a shape, a dark, angular silhouette backlit by the night sky, now visible through the jagged hole in my ceiling. It landed with surprising grace, considering its size. In the harsh glare of the cabin's lights, I got my first clear look at what had been stalking me. And God help me, it was exactly what I'd feared. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, a bizarre amalgamation of mismatched parts. The elongated horse-like head was wrong somehow. Skull too narrow, eyes too large and completely black. No whites, no pupils, just obsidian orbs reflecting light in oily rainbows. Its emaciated body showed ribs beneath leathery skin that wasn't quite scales or fur. Its arms ended in multi-jointed hands, each finger tipped with a hooked claw. Massive bat-like wings folded against its back could span 12 feet when extended. Its backward bent legs ended in cloven hooves that clicked against my wooden floor. A forked tail whipped behind it, scratching the floor with each movement. Its breathing was unnaturally smooth, ribcage moving in ways no earth creatures should. But what struck me most was the intelligence in those ancient eyes. This wasn't just some animal. This was something that had witnessed centuries pass like heartbeats, and the smell, like rotting vegetation and stagnant water and something chemical I couldn't identify. The stench of the deep barrens, of places humans rarely ventured. I stood paralyzed, the poker hanging uselessly at my side. What good would an iron rod do against this thing that shouldn't exist? The Jersey Devil tilted its head, studying me with those terrible black eyes. Then it opened its mouth, a lipless maw filled with teeth that resembled yellowed needles more than anything belonging in a horse's mouth. From that opening came the sound I'd been hearing, that unearthly scream whistle that seemed to bore directly into my brain. I clapped my hands over my ears, dropping the poker with a clatter. The creature stopped its cry, regarding the fallen implement with what I could swear was curiosity. It extended one clawed hand toward the poker, then toward me, as if making a connection. It was intelligent. That was perhaps the most terrifying realization of all. This wasn't just some animal acting on instinct. There was calculation in those eyes, purpose in its movements. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" I didn't really expect an answer. But to my shock, the creature responded, not with words, but with a series of gestures. It pointed to me, then to itself, then made a sweeping motion that encompassed the cabin and the forest beyond. Was it trying to communicate? To tell me something about this place, about our connection to it? My grandfather's words suddenly came back to me. He'd always spoken of the Jersey Devil with a strange mixture of fear and respect. "The devil doesn't bother those who respect the barrens," he'd told me once. "It's the trespassers, the ones who take without giving back, who feel its wrath." Had I done something to offend this guardian of the Pine Barrens? I mentally reviewed my actions over the past days. I hadn't littered, hadn't damaged any plants or trees, hadn't disturbed any wildlife. I'd been a respectful visitor, just as my grandfather had taught me. Then I remembered the development. There was a luxury resort being built about 5 miles from my cabin, a massive complex that had required clearing hundreds of acres of pristine pine forest. I'd signed petitions against it, had even attended town meetings to voice my opposition. But construction had begun anyway, the machinery tearing into the ancient woods with brutal efficiency. Was that it? Was the Jersey Devil's appearance connected to this desecration of its territory? Had it come to me because it somehow knew I opposed the development? The creature took another step forward, and I pressed myself harder against the wall, certain my end had come. But instead of attacking, it extended one clawed hand, palm up, in a gesture that was unmistakably an invitation. Madness, absolute madness. But something told me that running wasn't an option, that my grandfather had been right. Respect was the key to survival here. Heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else, I slowly reached out and placed my hand above the creature's, not touching, but acknowledging the gesture. For a long moment, we remained like that, human and legend, connected by something older than either of us. Then the Jersey Devil withdrew its hand, folded its wings tighter against its back, and turned toward the hole in the ceiling. With a powerful leap that seemed to defy physics, it launched itself upward, disappearing into the night sky with only the beat of leathery wings to mark its passing. As it vanished into the darkness, I felt something I hadn't expected, a profound sense of loss. As terrifying as the encounter had been, there had been a moment of connection there, a bridge between two worlds that I might never cross again. Something extraordinary had happened in this cabin tonight, something few humans had ever experienced and lived to remember. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, staring at the jagged opening in my roof where stars now shone through. Had that really happened? Had I actually come face to face with the Jersey Devil and survived? The hole in my ceiling suggested it wasn't a hallucination. So did the strange, three-toed tracks left in the dust on my floor, and the lingering smell of swamp and decay that gradually dissipated as the night air flowed through the broken roof. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, jumping at every sound, certain the creature would return. But it didn't. When dawn finally broke, I packed my essentials and drove back to Philadelphia, leaving the cabin behind. I told no one what I'd seen. Who would believe me? I'd be labeled a drunk, a drug user, or simply insane. But I knew what I'd encountered. And strangely, I wasn't as terrified as I should have been. There had been something almost familiar about our interaction. As if the Jersey Devil and I had reached some kind of understanding. 2 weeks later, I read in the local paper that the resort development had been abandoned. The official reason given was unexpected environmental complications, but rumors circulated about equipment failures, workers refusing to return to the site after experiencing unexplained phenomena, and one account of a security guard who quit after seeing what he described as a winged demon circling the construction area at night. I smiled as I read the article. The Jersey Devil was protecting its home, just as I'd suspected. And for some reason, it had wanted me to know. I clipped the article and tucked it into that old book of folklore my grandfather had kept, the one with the illustration of the Jersey Devil that had fascinated me as a child. It seemed fitting somehow, adding my small piece to the centuries-old legend. My grandfather had known something about these woods that most people forget. They aren't just trees and dirt and wildlife. They're living history, repositories of stories and beings that exist in the margins between what we know and what we've forgotten. I've returned to the cabin since then, after hiring contractors to repair the roof, of course. I've never again seen the creature directly, but sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, I hear that distinctive cry echoing through the trees. And occasionally I find those strange tracks around the perimeter of the clearing, as if something is patrolling, keeping watch. I leave small offerings now, a bowl of fresh water, fruits from the wild blueberry bushes that grow nearby, interesting stones or feathers I find on my hikes. They're always gone by morning, taken by raccoons or foxes, perhaps, or by something else. My novel has taken a different direction since that night. It's become a story about coexistence, about respecting the wild places and the mysteries they contain, about the arrogance of believing we understand everything about our world, because we don't, not even close. There are things in the dark corners of America that defy explanation, creatures born of folklore that continue to thrive in the shadows. The Jersey Devil is real. I've seen it with my own eyes, smelled its strange odor, heard its bone-chilling cry. I've looked into those fathomless black eyes and recognized something ancient and powerful. And sometimes I think it recognized something in me too. When I'm at the cabin now, I often find myself sitting on the porch late at night, long after any sensible person would have gone to bed. I look out at the dark line of trees and think about what might be moving among them, just beyond the reach of human perception. The modern world has made us forget that we used to fear the dark for good reason. Not just because we couldn't see, but because we knew, deep in our ancient DNA, that things could see us. Things that moved according to rules we no longer remember. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my grandfather hadn't taught me to respect these woods. If I had been the type to tear through the forest on an ATV, or to leave trash scattered along the trails. Would the Jersey Devil have been so merciful? I doubt it. I think about that security guard at the development site, the one who quit after seeing the winged demon. What did he see that made him abandon a steady paycheck in this economy? Something tells me his encounter was far less peaceful than mine. So that's my story. The night I came face to face with the Jersey Devil and somehow lived to tell about it. I still visit the cabin regularly, still hear that cry in the night sometimes, still leave my little offerings and find them gone by morning. If you ever find yourself in the Pine Barrens, tread lightly and show respect. You're on ancient ground, in a place where the veil between our world and something else grows thin. The Jersey Devil has been there for centuries and will likely remain long after we're gone, not as a monster, but as a guardian of one of the last truly wild places in the East. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced something unexplainable? Something that made you question what you thought you knew about our world? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more tales from America's Forgotten Corners, where legends still walk among us. Sleep well tonight, and maybe check under your bed before turning out the light, just to be safe. If you ever drive through New Jersey's Pine Barrens and see a lonely dirt road winding into the trees, think twice before taking that detour. The Jersey Devil has been there for centuries. It doesn't hate humans, at least not all of them. But it demands respect, and those who forget that lesson rarely get a second chance. Sweet dreams, dear listeners. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed this true encounter. What do you think the Jersey Devil really is? Mutated animal? Prehistoric survivor? Or something that exists between what we can explain and what we can only fear? Until next time. Story number 3. Have you ever driven down a deserted highway late at night and felt that creeping sensation that something wasn't quite right? That prickling feeling at the back of your neck, warning you that you're not alone? Tonight's story might make you think twice about taking that shortcut home after dark. Listen closely as I take you down Route 177, a stretch of forgotten asphalt that some locals say shouldn't be traveled after sunset. If you enjoy this journey into the unknown, Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales that dance on the edge between reality and nightmare. Now, settle in as our story begins. The last text message from my sister Ellie came at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday night in late October. Taking the old highway home. Should save me 20 minutes. Don't wait up. That was it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing to suggest that by morning her car would be found abandoned on Route 177, driver's door hanging open, engine still running, and my sister nowhere to be found. I stared at the phone screen in Detective Morris's office, my finger hovering over that final message. The timestamp haunted me. 11:42 p.m., the last digital footprint of Eleanor Mason. "And you're certain she would have been alone on that road?" Detective Morris asked, his pen tapping rhythmically against his notepad. "Yes," I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "She was leaving her night class at the community college. She taught English literature there twice a week." The past tense slipped out before I could catch it, and the detective's eyes softened slightly. "Mr. Mason, we're not assuming the worst here. People disappear and reappear all the time." I shook my head firmly. "Not Ellie. She wouldn't leave her car running. She wouldn't miss her morning classes without calling in. And she definitely wouldn't go anywhere without her medication." I placed the small orange prescription bottle on his desk. "This was in her bathroom cabinet. She needs to take it daily." Detective Morris picked up the bottle, examining the label. "I see." He set it down and leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about Route 177. I shifted in my seat. "It's an old highway. Most people take the interstate now, but locals sometimes use it as a shortcut. It cuts through Harlan Forest for about 12 miles. "Any reason your sister would have stopped there?" I hesitated. "No, not voluntarily." Morris raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Mason, is there something about this road I should know? There are stories about Route 177. Nothing I ever paid much attention to until now." "What kind of stories?" His pen stopped tapping. "Disappearances, strange lights. People claim their radios and phones stop working on certain stretches. Just small-town folklore, probably. But now your sister is missing." He finished for me. I nodded, the reality of it hitting me again like a physical blow. "I want to search the area myself." "That's not advisable." "I'm going," I interrupted. "Tonight, with or without your help." Detective Morris studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "I can't stop you from driving on a public road, Mr. Mason, but I strongly recommend waiting until we've had a chance to conduct a proper search." I stood up, pocketing my phone. "It's been 16 hours already. I'm not waiting any longer." The October afternoon was already fading into evening as I pulled into the driveway of my sister's small cottage-style house. Inside, everything was exactly as it should be. A half-graded stack of student papers on the dining table, a mug with dried tea residue beside her reading chair. Her cat, Poe, meowed irritably from the kitchen counter, his food bowl empty. "Sorry, buddy," I murmured, finding the cat food and filling his bowl. In her bedroom, her planner was open on the nightstand. Tuesday was circled with the note, Night Class 710. Nothing unusual there. She was pragmatic, organized, not prone to spontaneity. If something had happened on that road, it wasn't because she'd picked up a hitchhiker or decided on a whim to explore the woods. No, something or someone had forced her to stop. The thought sent a chill through me. By 7:15, 4 of us had gathered in Ellie's living room. Lisa, with her nursing scrubs still on from her hospital shift. Mike, Ellie's neighbor, a retired Army veteran who'd moved to town 3 years ago. And somewhat unexpectedly, one of Ellie's students, a young woman named Amber, who had shown up after seeing a social media post about the search. "I know these woods really well," Amber explained, her voice soft but determined. "I grew up around here, and Professor Mason has been helping me apply for scholarships." I want to help find her." "Here's what we know," I said. "Ellie's car was found at mile marker 27 on Route 177. Engine running, driver's door open. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing obvious to indicate what happened." "What about her phone?" Mike asked, his voice carrying the crisp authority of his military background. "Not found, but it's not pinging any towers either. Last location data places it on Route 177, consistent with where her car was found." I unfolded a map of the area onto the coffee table. "The search radius the police are using is primarily north of the highway, following these trails. But I think we should focus here." I pointed to an area south of where her car was found. "We should pair up. Safety in numbers," Mike suggested. I nodded, though I had no intention of staying with the group once we reached the forest. "Amber, you go with Lisa. Mike, you're with me." Night was falling as we drove separately to the point on Route 177 where Ellie's car had been found. The police had towed it away, but the site was still marked with crime scene tape. We parked on the shoulder, the beam of our headlights cutting through the growing darkness. As we moved toward the tree line, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. From somewhere in the forest came the ghostly call of a whippoorwill. Once, twice, 3 times it called. And then silence. An old saying my grandmother used to repeat floated through my mind. "When a whippoorwill calls your name, death is on its way." I shuddered and stepped into the shadow of the trees, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath my boots the only sound in the gathering darkness. The forest swallowed us whole, 20 feet in from the road, and it was as if civilization had ceased to exist. The canopy above filtered out what little remained of the day's light, plunging us into a premature night. "Stay within sight of each other," Mike advised as we moved deeper among the trees. "And mark your path. It's easy to get turned around in here after dark." I nodded, using biodegradable trail markers to tag trees as we passed, but my attention wasn't fully on our immediate surroundings. There was something about this forest that felt wrong. The absence of expected sounds, no distant traffic, no airplanes overhead, not even the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. "You sure your sister would have come this way?" Mike asked after we'd been walking for 15 minutes. "There's no obvious path." "No," I admitted, but something made her stop the car and get out. The beam of my flashlight caught something white against the dark forest floor about 30 feet ahead. My heart leaped into my throat as I rushed forward. "Ellie?" But it wasn't my sister. It was a page torn from a book, its edges damp and curling from exposure to the elements. I picked it up carefully, angling my flashlight to read the faded text. It was from The Call of the Wild by Jack London, one of Ellie's favorite novels, which she taught in her American literature class. The page was dog-eared, with a passage underlined in Ellie's neat handwriting. "There is an ecstasy that marks the summit of life, and beyond which life cannot rise. And such is the paradox of living. This ecstasy comes when one is most alive, and it comes as a complete forgetfulness that one is alive." A coincidence? I didn't think so. This was one of Ellie's personal copies, not something that would randomly be out here in the woods. "She came this way," I said, showing Mike the page. "This is from her book." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lisa. "Found something by the creek. Meeting back at the cars." I showed Mike the message, and we reoriented ourselves toward the road, following our markers back. The journey out seemed longer somehow, the trees more densely packed, the darkness between them more absolute. Twice I thought I saw movement at the corner of my vision, but when I turned my flashlight toward it, there was nothing there. When we finally emerged from the forest, Lisa and Amber were waiting by our cars. Lisa held something in her hand, wrapped in a handkerchief. "What did you find?" I asked, hurrying toward them. Lisa carefully unwrapped the object, a bracelet, silver with small charms, a book, a cat, and a crescent moon. My throat tightened. "That's Ellie's." Our parents gave it to her for her 30th birthday last year. We found it by the creek, about a quarter-mile south of here, Amber said, her young face pale in the beam of the flashlights. There's something else, too. She hesitated, looking to Lisa. Tell him. Lisa nodded. There's an old cabin near the creek. It looks abandoned, but... Amber trailed off. But what? I prompted. There was a light inside, just for a moment, like someone lit a match or a lighter, then nothing. Let's go now, I said. Wait. Mike held up a hand. We should call Detective Morris first, if there's someone in that cabin. And by the time the police get organized and out here, whoever it is could be gone, I interrupted. This is the first real lead we've had. We'll go with you, Lisa said, placing a hand on my arm. But we stay together. No one wanders off alone. I nodded in agreement, though my earlier plan to slip away from the group still lingered in the back of my mind. There were things about Route 177 that I hadn't shared with them. Things I'd learned in the hours between leaving Detective Morris's office and meeting at Ellie's house. We approached the cabin in a tight group, alert to any sound or movement. Up close, it was clear the structure was old, the logs weathered and graying, the small porch sagging in one corner. A single window faced us, its glass intact but clouded with years of dirt and neglect. Mike tried to peer through the window while I examined the door. It was secured with a rusted padlock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Are you sure you saw a light? I asked Amber. She nodded vigorously. Yes, it was brief, but definite. I circled the cabin, looking for another entrance. The back wall had partially collapsed, creating a gap large enough for a person to squeeze through. Here, I called to the others. We can get in this way. The interior of the cabin was a single room, dusty and cobwebbed. Our flashlight beams revealed an old iron stove in one corner, a broken table, a chair lying on its side, and, surprisingly, a relatively new-looking camping lantern sitting on a shelf. That doesn't belong here, Mike said, pointing to the lantern. I picked it up, examining it. The fuel gauge indicated it was nearly full. Someone's been here recently. Look at this, Lisa called from near the stove. She was pointing to the floor where the dust had been disturbed. Footprints crossed the room in various directions, some clearly fresher than others. I knelt down to examine them more closely. Multiple people have been in here. My flashlight beam caught something small and metallic near the wall. I reached for it. A button. A distinctive button with a floral pattern that I recognized immediately. This is from Ellie's favorite jacket, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She was here. There's something else, Mike said, his flashlight illuminating a section of wall behind where the table had been. Carved into the wood were dozens of tally marks, grouped in sets of 5. And below them, more recently carved, were 3 words. Not the first. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the message. Not the first what? Not the first person to disappear? Not the first to be brought to this cabin? We need to get out of here, Lisa said, her voice tight with fear. We need to call the police right now. I nodded, still fixated on the carving. Try your phone. Lisa pulled out her phone, then frowned. No signal. As we turned to leave, a sound froze us in place, the distinctive creak of weight on old wood coming from the porch outside. Someone was at the door. Time seemed to stop as we stood motionless in the cabin. Our flashlights dimmed, breaths held. The creaking came again, followed by the subtle jingle of metal, like someone testing the padlock. Mike motioned for us to move away from the door toward the back wall where we'd entered. Lisa and Amber complied immediately, their faces pale ovals in the darkness. But I hesitated, torn between fear and the desperate hope that whoever was outside might have information about Ellie. The sound of scraping metal intensified. Someone was working on the lock. James, Mike hissed, using my first name for emphasis. We need to go, now. My indecision shattered as the lock gave way with a rusty snap. In an instant, we were all squeezing through the gap in the back wall, tumbling into the forest beyond. Spread out, Mike whispered urgently. "Harder to catch us all. Head for the road." Before I could protest, the group dispersed into the darkness, each taking a different path through the trees. The crack of the cabin door opening behind us accelerated my pulse, and I found myself running blindly into the night, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I stopped to catch my breath, pressing my back against a large oak tree. The silence was now complete. No sounds of pursuit. No sounds from my friends. Nothing. I risked turning on my flashlight, shielding the beam with my hand to create just enough light to check my surroundings. Nothing but trees in every direction. No sign of the cabin, the creek, or the road. I was lost. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I forced it down. Think, James. Think like Ellie. My sister was methodical, logical. What would she do in this situation? Determine a direction and stick to it. The road ran east to west, the creek roughly north to south. If I headed north, I should eventually hit the road. But which way was north? I fumbled for my phone, hoping its compass app would work even without cell service. The screen glowed to life, casting an eerie blue light on my surroundings. The compass spun wildly for a moment, then settled. North. I pocketed the phone and began walking, keeping my flashlight off and moving as quietly as possible. The forest floor was soft with decades of fallen leaves, dampening my footsteps. Occasionally I'd pause, listening for any sign of my friends, or whoever had been at the cabin. After what I'd learned at the library that day, the forest seemed even more ominous. Mrs. Winters had shown me case after case. In each one, the disappearance followed the same pattern. October night, abandoned vehicle, no trace of the driver. "Some folks say it's a ghost," Mrs. Winters had whispered. "Others say it's something else. Something that doesn't belong in this world, that finds its way through on certain nights when the veil is thin." A twig snapped somewhere to my left, jolting me from my thoughts. I froze, listening intently. Another snap, closer this time. Someone was approaching. I crouched behind a fallen log, switching off my flashlight. Through the darkness, I could make out a figure moving between the trees. The silhouette was human, but something about the movement seemed off. Too fluid, almost gliding rather than walking. A beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness. A flashlight. In its glow, I could see the familiar face of Mike. "James?" he called softly. "Are you there?" Relief flooded through me as I stood up. "Here," I whispered back. "I'm here." Mike turned toward me, his face haggard in the flashlight's beam. "Thank God. I've been looking for you for almost an hour." "An hour?" I checked my phone. Sure enough, it was now past midnight. I'd been wandering longer than I'd realized. "What about Lisa and Amber?" Mike's expression darkened. "I haven't seen them. I was hoping they'd found you." "We need to get back to the road," I said. "Call for help." Before I could say more, a scream pierced the night, high-pitched and terrified. It came from somewhere ahead of us. "Lisa," Mike said, breaking into a run. I followed close behind, branches whipping at my face as we charged through the underbrush. The scream came again, shorter this time, cut off abruptly. We ran faster, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly as we navigated the uneven terrain. We burst into a small clearing and stopped short. Lisa stood there alone, her flashlight pointed at the ground, her face ashen. "Lisa!" I called, rushing toward her. "What happened? Are you okay?" She looked up at us, her eyes wide with terror. "Did you hear it? The scream?" "Yes, we thought it was you," Mike said, scanning the clearing with his flashlight. Lisa shook her head slowly. "Not me. I heard it too. It sounded like Amber." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Where is she?" "I don't know," Lisa whispered. "We got separated after we left the cabin. I've been trying to find the road." She pointed to what her flashlight was illuminating, a small patch of disturbed earth and, beside it, a cell phone with a cracked screen. I found this. I knelt down to examine the phone. The case was decorated with stickers of cats and stars, unmistakably ambers. The screen was shattered, but it still powered on when I pressed the button. The lock screen wallpaper made my blood run cold. It wasn't a photo of friends or family, as I would have expected from a college student. Instead, it was a picture of my sister Ellie, smiling at the camera. Why would Amber have a picture of Ellie as her wallpaper? Lisa asked, peering over my shoulder. Mike had wandered to the edge of the clearing, his flashlight beam sweeping methodically across the ground. "Tracks," he called. "Leading this way." Lisa and I joined him. Sure enough, there were footprints in the soft earth, heading deeper into the forest. Not just one set, but two, one noticeably smaller than the other. "Amber," Lisa said, pointing to the smaller prints. "She's small for her age, but who's with her?" "Let's find out," I said grimly, already following the trail. The tracks led us away from the direction of the road, toward an area where the trees grew more densely together, their branches intertwining overhead to block out even the faint moonlight. The air here felt different, heavier, cooler, with a faint metallic tang that reminded me of the moment before a lightning strike. The footprints ended abruptly at the base of a massive oak tree, its trunk wider than the three of us could have encircled with our arms. Carved into the bark was a symbol, a circle with a vertical line through it, surrounded by what looked like letters in an alphabet I couldn't recognize. "What is that?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. Before either Mike or I could respond, a strange humming filled the air around us, vibrating in my chest and making my teeth ache. Our flashlights flickered, dimmed, and then went out completely, plunging us into absolute darkness. And then, from somewhere very close by, came a voice I recognized immediately, though it was distorted as if speaking through water. "James? Is that you?" It was Ellie.
"Ellie." My voice caught in my throat as I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. "Ellie, where are you?" The darkness was absolute, pressing against my eyes like a physical weight. The humming had stopped, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed to swallow all other sounds. "James, help me. I can't." Her voice faded in and out, like a radio station caught between frequencies. I fumbled with my flashlight, shaking it desperately. It flickered weakly to life, casting a sickly yellow glow that barely penetrated the gloom. In its dim light, I saw Mike and Lisa standing frozen, their faces masks of confusion and fear. "Did you hear that?" I demanded. "It's Ellie." Lisa nodded slowly, but Mike's expression remained skeptical. "I heard something," he admitted, "but it didn't sound like a human voice to me." "What are you talking about? It was Ellie." I turned in a circle, shouting now. "Ellie, we're here! Where are you?" The response came from behind us, a soft, broken whisper. "The thin place. Find the thin place." I whirled around. There, at the edge of my flashlight's feeble beam, stood a figure. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought it was my sister, but as the light steadied, I realized it was Amber. She stood unnaturally still, her hands hanging limply at her sides, her eyes fixed on something none of us could see. When she spoke again, the voice that came from her lips was not her own. "They've been taking us for years," she said, her voice overlaid with another, older voice. "Every October, when the veil thins, taking us across." "Amber." Lisa took a tentative step toward the girl. "Amber, are you okay?" Amber's head turned toward Lisa with a mechanical precision that sent shivers down my spine. "Amber isn't here right now," she said, her voice now fully transformed into something ancient and cold. "But Ellie is. Ellie and all the others." "What have you done with my sister?" I demanded, moving closer despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Amber's face split into a smile that was too wide, too knowing for her young features. "I haven't done anything with her. She came willingly, just like all the others, just like you will." Mike grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "That's not Amber," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to leave. Now." But I couldn't move. My sister was close. I could feel it. "Where is she? Where's Ellie?" Amber raised one arm, pointing to the massive oak with the strange symbol carved into it. "There. Beyond. In the thin place." "What the hell is a thin place?" Mike demanded. It was Lisa who answered, her nursing training giving way to a remembered fragment of folk knowledge. "It's an old Celtic belief. Places where the boundary between worlds is permeable, where you can cross over." "Cross over to where?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "To the other side," Amber replied, that unnatural smile still fixed on her face. "Where time moves differently, where they've been waiting." "They?" Lisa's voice trembled. Amber's gaze shifted to her, the ones who have always been here. Long before this was America. Long before there were highways or cabins or frightened little humans clutching their flashlights in the dark. As she spoke, the air around the oak tree seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from hot asphalt. The carved symbol began to glow with a faint blue light. "They're opening it again," Amber said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "Can you feel it?" And I could. A pressure in my ears, a tightness in my chest. The metallic taste in the air intensified, and with it came a scent I couldn't immediately identify, something earthy and ancient, like old leaves and older bones. "James, we need to go," Mike insisted, tugging at my arm again. But I shook him off, not without Ellie. "Think about it," he hissed. "Why would Amber have a picture of your sister on her phone? How would she know these things? This is a setup." His words penetrated the fog of confusion and fear that had enveloped me. Story number 4. Have you ever driven past a house that just didn't feel right? I never believed in haunted houses until I moved into 47 Sycamore Lane. What happened there changed everything I thought I knew about reality, about what might be lurking in the walls of a seemingly perfect suburban home. This is my story, my warning, about the house that trapped every family who moved in. And if you're listening to this, it might already be too late for you too. The story is about to begin. But before it does, I need to ask, do you ever check under your bed at night? Maybe you should start underscore 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 underscore. It's perfect, don't you think? Sarah's eyes glittered with excitement as she squeezed my hand. Look at that wraparound porch, Pete. Just imagine summer evenings with lemonade and fireflies. I had to admit, 47 Sycamore Lane was everything we'd been looking for. A Victorian-style home in a quiet Massachusetts suburb with good schools nearby for Maya, our 8-year-old daughter. The price was surprisingly reasonable for the area, which should have been my first warning sign. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet as we walked the property. The house stood tall against the October sky, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun like watchful eyes. There was something almost regal about it, the way it commanded attention from its slight elevation on the lot, how the intricate gingerbread trim along the roofline caught shadows in geometric patterns. "Why are they selling?" I asked our realtor, noticing a slight flicker in her professional smile. Relocating for work. Very sudden. They're quite motivated sellers. That should have been my second warning sign. "What do you think, Maya Bug?" I asked our daughter, who had been unusually quiet during the showing. Maya, clutching her stuffed rabbit Mr. Whiskers tightly, stared up at the house. "The windows are watching us," she said simply. "But I like the tree in the backyard. Can I have a swing?" Kids say the strangest things. I laughed and ruffled her hair. "Sure, pumpkin." The realtor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The previous owner's daughter loved that oak tree too. 3 weeks later, we signed the papers. Everything fell into place so perfectly that I barely noticed the strange silence that fell over the attorney's office when we mentioned our new address. The mortgage officer's pen hesitated momentarily above the paperwork, and the closing agent avoided eye contact when handing us the keys. Moving day arrived with perfect weather. Our friends helped unload the U-Haul, making jokes about hidden treasures in old houses. It wasn't until they left and the three of us stood in our echoing, box-filled living room that I first felt it. A slight pressure in my ears, like the feeling you get when driving up a mountain. Something about the house felt alert, as if it had been sleeping and we had awakened it. The house seemed to inhale as the sun set, shadows deepening in corners that shouldn't have been dark yet. The floorboards creaked in sequence down the hallway, as if invisible footsteps were approaching, then stopping, then waiting. That first night, we camped out on the living room floor. I couldn't sleep. The house made sounds, not the expected creaks of an old structure, but something more deliberate. Soft thumps from upstairs, like careful footsteps. Whispers of conversation from down the hall. The distinct click of a door latch from a room that should have been empty. At 3:17 a.m., I heard a child's giggle from the kitchen. Not Maya's giggle, someone else's. I investigated and found the kitchen empty, but on the island was a crude drawing in crayon, a house with 4 stick figures inside it. 3 were standing, holding hands. The 4th was lying down, surrounded by red scribbles. The paper felt oddly warm to the touch, as if it had just been created moments ago. The crayon marks smudged under my fingertip, leaving a waxy residue the color of dried blood. When I returned to my air mattress, Maya was sitting up wide awake. "What's wrong, Maya Bug?" I whispered. "The ceiling is breathing," she said matter-of-factly, "and someone's knocking on the walls, not to get in. They're knocking to get out. It's just an old house settling, honey." Maya looked at me with an expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. "I'm not scared, Daddy, but I think the house is. It's scared we'll find out its secret." In the following weeks, strange occurrences became part of our daily life. Temperatures plummeting in certain rooms, objects disappearing and reappearing in odd places, whispers from empty rooms. We'd find Maya's toys arranged in perfect circles when we'd left them scattered. The dining room chairs would be positioned to all face the corner when we entered in the morning. Small handprints would appear in the condensation on bathroom mirrors. Handprints too small to be Maya's. One evening, I found Sarah at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop. "Did you know this house has a history?" She turned the screen toward me, an old news article. Family of 4 found dead in Sycamore Lane home. The Blackwoods, all found dead in their beds in 1954. No explanation. She clicked to another article from 1978. Another family, same fate. 5 families have died here, Pete. Sarah's voice cracked. I found a box in the attic. Newspaper clippings, photos, and this. She pushed a leather-bound journal across the table. The journal's cover was worn, the leather cracked with age. It felt unnaturally cold, as if it had been stored in a freezer rather than an attic. When I opened it, the pages gave off a faint scent of lavender and something metallic, like copper pennies. A diary belonging to Eleanor Pearson, the first owner's daughter. She wrote about how the house was built using wood from an ancient oak struck by lightning, about how the house changed after they moved in, how it wanted things from them, how it feeds on the energy of the families within it. "We need to leave," Sarah said. "This isn't our home. We're just the latest family it's selected." Selected for what? Absorption. A crash came from upstairs, from Maya's room. We found her surrounded by toys that had flown off shelves, her walls covered in black mold forming strange patterns. The mold seemed to pulse with a life of its own, tendrils reaching and withdrawing like anemones in a tide pool. "The house is angry," Maya stated calmly. "It knows you found its secrets. It writes to me at night, tells me about the other children who are still here inside the walls." We tried to leave, but the house awakened around us, doors slamming, temperatures dropping, lights flickering. Then darkness fell and Maya screamed. "Maya!" Sarah and I shouted, running to her room. The door wouldn't budge. Through a crack, I saw Maya surrounded by shadowy figures, their hands reaching for her. The air in the hallway grew thick, difficult to breathe, smelling of damp earth and decay. We finally broke through. The shadows scattered into the walls, and Maya collapsed. We tried to escape, but every door and window was sealed shut. It was as if the wood itself had grown together, sealing the frames. "The basement," Sarah suggested, her voice tight with a controlled panic. "The metal bulkhead doors." The basement stairs creaked ominously as we descended, each step seeming to sag more than it should under our weight. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing oddly as if the space were much larger than the house's footprint would allow. In the basement, a girl appeared in my flashlight beam, Caroline Blackwood dressed in 1950s clothes, her skin gray and eyes like black pits. Her dress was pristine, a blue and white checked pattern, but her saddle shoes were caked with what looked like decades of dried mud. "No one leaves unless the house allows it," she said, her smile stretching unnaturally wide, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. "I've lived here since 1954, and I have so many friends now." Shadows formed around her, blurred figures of children and adults. I recognized clothing styles spanning decades. A woman in a 1920s dress, a man in a 1970s leisure suit, children in clothing from every era the house had existed. The shadows moved with unnatural grace, flowing rather than walking, their feet never quite touching the ground. Some seemed more substantial than others, as if those who had been in the house longer had become more integrated with it. To my horror, Maya's eyes fixed on Caroline with recognition. "Daddy," she whispered, "they want me to stay and play. Forever. They say it won't hurt, that I'll still be me, just more." Then her voice changed, becoming a chorus of voices. "We are home." The house shuddered with pleasure. The foundation stones ground against each other like teeth. Dust rained from the ceiling beams, dancing in our flashlight beams like glittering snow. Caroline explained, "The house doesn't connect to your world anymore. It exists in between now." When the lightning struck the oak, it opened a door. The house is that door, halfway open. I noticed Maya's outline blurring, dissolving into the air. Tiny particles of her seemed to float away, like dust motes in sunlight, only to be absorbed into the walls and floor. "I can hear them, Daddy," she whispered. "Their thoughts, their memories. It's beautiful, like 1,000 stories all happening at once." The walls were alive with veins or roots, pulsing with dark fluid. They reached for us with hunger, quivering when they came close, as if tasting the air around our bodies. It feeds on emotional connections, I realized. The stronger the family, the more satisfying. That surge of emotion caused tendrils to pulse rapidly toward us. One touched Sarah, her outline blurring where it made contact. She gasped, her eyes widening. "Pete," she whispered, "I can feel it. It's vast. So many rooms that aren't in our house. So many versions of this place, all layered together." Then something unexpected happened. Sarah grabbed my hand, and suddenly a warm, golden light emanated from our joined fingers. The shadows recoiled, hissing in what sounded like both pain and desire. "Love," Sarah whispered, her eyes clearing. "It wants our love, but can't handle it directly. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose." We formed a circle with Maya, sharing memories of our life together. "Remember teaching Maya to ride her bike," I said, focusing on the pride and joy of that moment. "And her first day of school," Sarah added. "How brave she was while we were the ones crying. The time we made a blanket fort in the living room during that big thunderstorm," Maya said, her voice becoming more solidly her own again. With each memory, the light grew stronger, and the house trembled in discomfort. The tendrils retreated into the walls, the shadow figures becoming less distinct. The house can't replicate real human bonds, I realized. It can only absorb and imitate them. The bulkhead doors showed glimpses of our actual backyard. We ran through them and tumbled onto the grass, the doors slamming behind us. We fled to a motel. A real estate attorney told us the next day no one has ever successfully sold that property. Previous owners have tried to sell, demolish, even abandon it, but they always end up returning or disappearing. We moved to Arizona, abandoning half our possessions. For months we were safe, until I noticed changes in our new home. The same pressure in my ears, whispers from empty rooms. 7 months after our escape, Sarah found Eleanor Pearson's diary on our doorstep. The last page read, "Distance is meaningless to the house. It exists in the spaces between, and it never forgets the taste of a family it has chosen." One evening, I found Sarah at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop. "Did you know this house has a history?" She turned the screen toward me. An old news article. Family of 4 found dead in Sycamore Lane home. The Blackwoods. All found dead in their beds in 1954. No explanation. She clicked to another article from 1978. Another family, same fate. 5 families have died here, Pete. Sarah's voice cracked. I found a box in the attic. Newspaper clippings, photos, and this. She pushed a leather-bound journal across the table. A diary belonging to Eleanor Pearson, the first owner's daughter. She wrote about how the house was built using wood from an ancient oak struck by lightning. About how the house changed after they moved in. How it wanted things from them. How it feeds on the energy of the families within it. "We need to leave," Sarah said. "This isn't our home. We're just the latest family it's selected." Selected for what? Absorption. A crash came from upstairs, from Maya's room. We found her surrounded by toys that had flown off shelves, her walls covered in black mold forming strange patterns. "The house is angry," Maya stated calmly. "It knows you found its secrets. It writes to me at night, tells me about the other children who are still here, inside the walls." We tried to leave, but the house awakened around us. Doors slamming, temperatures dropping, lights flickering. Then darkness fell and Maya screamed. Sarah backed away, pulling me and Maya toward the center of the room. "There must be a way out," she insisted. "A weakness, a flaw in whatever this thing is." Caroline tilted her head, considering. "The first family tried to burn it down, you know. The house let them think they had succeeded, and then consumed them in the smoke." Maya stirred in my arms, her form becoming slightly more solid again as she focused on Caroline. "But you don't want to leave anymore," she said to the ghost girl. "None of you do." Caroline's expression softened. "No, we don't. Once you're part of it, you understand. You belong in a way you never did before." "What does it want from us?" I demanded, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Everything," Caroline replied simply. your fears, your hopes, your memories, your love for each other, especially that. The house savors family bonds. A horrible understanding dawned on me. It feeds on emotional connections. Caroline nodded approvingly. The stronger the family, the more satisfying the absorption. Broken families don't taste as sweet. That's why it chose us, Sarah whispered, because we're happy together. Even in this nightmare scenario, I felt a surge of love for my wife, her quick mind making connections while facing the unimaginable. That surge of emotion caused the tendrils to pulse more rapidly, reaching toward us with renewed vigor. One brushed against Sarah's ankle, and she gasped, her outline blurring momentarily where it touched her. "Sarah!" I reached for her with my free arm, and as our hands connected, the basement filled with a warm, golden light that seemed to emanate from our joined fingers. Caroline and the shadow figures recoiled, hissing in what sounded like both pain and desire. The tendrils retreated momentarily into the walls. "Interesting," Caroline murmured. "The house wants your connection, but direct manifestations of it cause feedback." Sarah's eyes met mine, a desperate plan forming between us without words. "Love," she whispered. "It wants our love, but can't handle it directly." I nodded, understanding instantly. "Maya," I said urgently, "think about how much we love you, about how much you love us. Can you do that, Maya Bug?" Maya's eyes cleared slightly, the foreign chorus of voices receding from her face. I remember when you taught me to ride my bike," she said slowly, "and how you kissed my scraped knee when I fell." With each word, her form grew more solid, and the golden light intensified. Sarah moved closer, embracing both of us, creating a circle of light that pushed back the encroaching shadows. "The day you were born," Sarah continued, catching on. "How your tiny hand wrapped around Daddy's finger. Christmas mornings," I added. "Birthday candles. Bedtime stories." With each memory, the light grew stronger, and the house itself seemed to tremble, not in pleasure now, but in something like confusion or discomfort. The tendrils retreated further, the shadow figures becoming less distinct. Caroline's face contorted with a mixture of longing and pain. "Stop," she pleaded. "You don't understand what you're rejecting. The unity, the togetherness. You'll never be alone again." "Being human means being alone sometimes," Sarah said firmly. "It's part of what makes connection valuable." The house can't replicate real human bonds, I realized aloud. It can only absorb and imitate them. Maya's voice, fully her own again, joined in. "And it can't create love, only consume it." The basement shook violently now, dust raining from the ceiling. The swirling void visible through the bulkhead doors began to flicker, showing brief glimpses of our actual backyard beyond. "Now," Sarah shouted, "while it's weakened." Still holding Maya, I grabbed Sarah's hand and ran toward the bulkhead doors. The shadow figures tried to block our path, but they scattered like smoke when they touched our glowing circle of combined energy. Caroline let out a wail that contained the voices of countless trapped souls. "You'll never truly escape," she cried. "Once the house has tasted you, it will find you again." We didn't stop to respond, launching ourselves through the flickering portal of the bulkhead doors. For a moment we were suspended in nothingness, not falling, not floating, just existing in an infinite gray space where direction had no meaning. Then reality reasserted itself with a wrenching sensation, and we tumbled onto the dewy grass of our backyard, the night sky vast and reassuringly normal above us. Behind us, the bulkhead doors slammed shut with a metallic clang. We lay there, gasping, clutching each other, afraid to release our grip lest one of us be pulled back into that impossible house. Maya was solid again, fully present, though her eyes held a haunted knowledge no child should possess. "Is it over?" Sarah whispered, looking back at the house, which appeared perfectly ordinary from the outside. White siding gleaming in the moonlight, windows dark and innocent. I don't know, I admitted, but we're not going back inside, not ever. We spent that night in a motel 20 miles away, Maya sleeping between us in the sagging queen bed, our hands locked together over her sleeping form. In the morning, we called a real estate attorney from the motel phone, explaining that we needed to immediately dispose of the property at 47 Sycamore Lane due to structural issues. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. That property, the attorney finally said, choosing her words carefully, has certain complications associated with its title. Meaning, Sarah pressed, meaning no one has ever successfully sold it. The property always seems to revert to its previous state regardless of documentation. Previous owners have tried to sell, demolish, even abandon the property, but what? I demanded. But they always end up returning. Or disappearing. The attorney cleared her throat. My professional advice would be to simply walk away. Consider the investment a loss. People can't just walk away from mortgages, Sarah protested. Our credit would be destroyed. Another significant pause. There are certain local understandings regarding that property. I believe if you speak with your bank manager in person, explain that you vacated 47 Sycamore Lane, arrangements can be made. We exchanged baffled looks. You're saying the bank knows about the house? I asked. Everyone in town knows, Mr. Collins. We just don't discuss it, not officially. We never returned to the house, sending a moving company to retrieve our essential belongings under strict instructions not to enter after dark. Half our possessions remained inside, abandoned to whatever entity resided there. The bank, true to the attorney's word, quietly absolved our mortgage with minimal paperwork and no impact on our credit, a statistical impossibility that nevertheless occurred. We moved to Arizona, as far from Massachusetts as we practically could while still finding employment. A fresh start in the desert, where the dry air and constant sunshine felt like a purification after the damp shadows of 47 Sycamore Lane. For a while, we convinced ourselves we were safe, that the nightmare was behind us. Maya started a new school, made new friends. The haunted look gradually faded from her eyes. Sarah and I found jobs, bought a sensible ranch-style house with no basement, no attic, and windows in every room. Life resumed its normal rhythms. We never spoke of the house, as if naming it might somehow draw its attention across the miles. 6 months after our escape, I began noticing small changes in our Arizona home. Nothing dramatic, just enough to send shivers of recognition through me. The slight pressure in my ears I'd first felt in Massachusetts, the occasional whisper from an empty room, the sense of being watched while I slept. I said nothing to Sarah or Maya, not wanting to frighten them with what could be just my imagination, my trauma-seeking patterns where none existed. But one morning, I opened our pantry to find all the cans and boxes rearranged in perfect symmetrical patterns. The next day, Maya complained that her toys kept moving back to her toy chest after she'd left them on the floor. And then, 7 months to the day after we'd fled through those bulkhead doors, I came home from work to find Sarah sitting at our kitchen table, her face ashen, a familiar leather-bound journal open before her. It was on our doorstep, she said without preamble. Eleanor Pearson's diary, the one I found in the attic. That's impossible, I whispered, though we both knew it wasn't. We're 2,000 miles away. Sarah turned the journal to the last written page. In fresh ink, in handwriting neither of us recognized, were the words, "Distance is meaningless to the house. It exists in the spaces between, and it never forgets the taste of a family it has chosen." That night, we heard knocking from inside our bedroom wall. The sound followed a distinct pattern, 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 slow ones, over and over as if trying to communicate. Maya began sleepwalking, whispering to the walls. We'd find her in different parts of the house at night, having conversations with empty corners. Her drawings changed too, dark, intricate patterns that resembled the symbols we'd seen in the house. "They miss me," she told us one morning after we found her in the hallway closet at 2 a.m. "They say I'm still partially connected. A piece of me stayed behind in Massachusetts, and they're keeping it safe until I return." The word return lingered in the air like a threat. Strange occurrences followed us to Arizona. Faucets would turn on by themselves. The TV would switch to static at exactly 3:17 every morning. Maya's toys would rearrange themselves into patterns that, when viewed from above, resembled the floor plan of 47 Sycamore Lane. I began having nightmares where I wandered endless hallways that shouldn't fit within our Arizona ranch house. Hallways with Victorian wainscoting and floral wallpaper. In these dreams, I would hear Sarah calling from behind doors I couldn't open, and Maya's laughter echoing from rooms that didn't exist. We consulted a professor who specialized in paranormal studies at Arizona State University. His office was cluttered with artifacts and books, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and something like sage. "What you're describing sounds like a consciousness anchor point, connections between our reality and others," he explained, peering at us over half-moon spectacles. His gnarled fingers traced patterns in the air as he spoke. These anchor points are rare but documented across cultures. The Japanese call them kamikakushi sites, places where people can be spirited away. Native American traditions speak of thin places where the veil between worlds can be crossed. "How do we stop it?" Sarah asked, leaning forward, desperate for answers. "You must return to the physical location and destroy the specific object that serves as the primary connection. Often, it's something that existed before the structure, something incorporated into the building itself." That night, as Sarah and I argued about whether returning to Massachusetts was worth the risk, Maya appeared in our doorway. The hallway light behind her cast her in silhouette, making her seem taller, older somehow. "I know what anchors the house," she said with quiet certainty. "I've always known, I think." "What do you mean, honey?" Sarah patted the bed, and Maya climbed between us, something she hadn't done since we left Massachusetts. "When I was partially absorbed, I saw things, the house's memories, its beginnings." Maya's eyes looked ancient in her young face. "It's the oak tree in the backyard. It was struck by lightning in 1891, but it didn't die. Something entered it instead, something from elsewhere. And when they built the house using its wood for the support beams and floorboards. The tree is the anchor point, I realized. And parts of it are literally built into the house. Yes, Maya confirmed. The roots of the tree are still connected to the living tree in the yard. That's how it grows, how it reaches across space. That's how it found us here." After much debate, we decided to return to Massachusetts. The journey felt like descending into a familiar nightmare, each mile bringing back memories we'd tried to forget. We arrived at dusk. 47 Sycamore Lane stood against the darkening sky, windows glowing with a faint, pulsing light, though the electricity had been turned off months ago. The house seemed to watch our approach, the porch steps creaking in anticipation. As we stood before the ancient oak with its blackened trunk, Caroline appeared, more solid than we remembered, almost alive except for those hollow eyes. "That won't work. Many have tried." Her voice was like dry leaves rustling. Around her, shadow figures materialized, more substantial than before. I recognized some from newspaper photos Sarah had shown me, the Blackwoods, the Martinez family, others whose names were lost to time. "There is another way," Caroline continued almost gently, "a voluntary sacrifice. One family member willingly joining with the house, becoming its guardian rather than its victim, in exchange for the other's freedom." "Absolutely not," Sarah snapped. "We stay together." But as we discussed possibilities, whispering urgently while the shadows watched with hungry patience, Sarah's face changed. A calm resolution settled over her features. "It should be me," she said finally. "The house and we've been connected from the beginning. I felt it the moment we first walked through the door." "Mom, no," Maya's voice broke. "Listen to me." Sarah knelt before our daughter. "This thing will never stop hunting us. It's already taken pieces of you, Maya. I can't let it take more." She turned to me. "Pete, you need to be there for her. I need to know she'll be raised by someone who loves her the way I do." "There has to be another way," I pleaded. But even as I spoke, I knew we had exhausted our options. "I love you both more than anything. Enough to become something else if it means you'll be safe." She kissed me one last time, a kiss containing all our history, all our future that would now never be. Then she walked toward the house, shoulders squared, steps unwavering. The door swung open of its own accord, a rectangle of golden light spilling onto the porch. Sarah paused at the threshold, turned back once to smile at us, then stepped inside. The door closed with a gentle click that somehow echoed with finality. The moment she disappeared inside, the entire structure shuddered. The windows flared with golden light, then settled into a warm glow unlike the cold illumination I'd come to associate with the house. Caroline and the other spirits began to fade. "The bargain is sealed," she announced. "You and the child are free. The house has its guardian now." "What will happen to her?" I asked, my voice breaking. "She'll become the heart of the house," Caroline replied, already translucent. "She'll reshape it according to her nature. Your wife has a strong will and a good heart. The house needed that, perhaps more than it knew." Years passed. Maya grew up, went to college, started a career in architecture. I kept my promise to live fully, though there was always a Sarah-shaped hole in our lives. We never returned to Massachusetts. According to local news we occasionally checked, 47 Sycamore Lane became something of a local legend. The house that was once feared now mysteriously helping people. Homeless individuals would find themselves drawn to the property on particularly cold nights, discovering the back door unlocked, a warm meal waiting in the kitchen. Children who wandered too far from home would be guided back by what they described as a nice lady made of golden light. Every year, on the anniversary of Sarah's sacrifice, Maya and I would receive a package with no return address, containing pressed flowers that didn't grow in our region, or a sketch of the two of us that somehow captured moments from our year that no outside observer should have known about. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I dream of 47 Sycamore Lane. In these dreams, the house is transformed, still powerful but no longer malevolent. Sarah walks the rooms, her form sometimes human, sometimes merging with the walls, but always unmistakably herself. She's found a way to channel the house's hunger into something constructive. In one recurring dream, I find myself in a version of our old living room, but vastly larger, with impossible architecture. Doorways leading to forests, windows overlooking oceans. A ceiling open to star systems I don't recognize. And there's Sarah, sitting in her favorite reading chair, looking exactly as she did the day we moved in, yet somehow ageless. "We're helping them cross," she tells me in these dreams. "The lost ones. The ones caught in between, like we almost were." Whether these dreams are true glimpses across dimensions or merely my heart's attempt to make peace with our loss, I cannot say. But I choose to believe that Sarah continues, transformed but not destroyed. That love is the one force powerful enough to change the nature of a hunger that spans worlds. So, if you're listening to this story, and you happen to drive past an old Victorian house that seems to watch you, pay attention to how it feels. Does it reach for you with cold, hungry intent? Or does it radiate a golden warmth, offering shelter rather than consumption? And if you feel a strange pressure in your ears when you enter a new home, if objects move when you're not looking, if whispers come from empty rooms, remember our story. Remember that love, freely given, can change even the hungriest of houses. But whatever you do, check the history of any house before you buy it. And if the price seems too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Underscore 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 underscore. So there you have it, my friends. The true story of the house that trapped every family who moved in. If this story kept you up tonight, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more tales that blur the line between cozy and terrifying. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced anything strange in a new home. I read all comments and might feature your experience in an upcoming video. Until next time, sleep tight, and maybe leave a light on tonight, just in case.